When the applause finally died down, I stayed in my seat a moment longer than everyone else, letting the sound wash past me like it belonged to someone in another room. I kept my smile in place because that is what you do when you are a woman my age and you have learned that making a scene never makes people kinder. I watched Michael step off the small stage and immediately get pulled into a circle of investors and employees, all of them eager to congratulate him, all of them acting as if he had appeared out of thin air at 42 years old, fully formed and successful. Samantha moved with him like a shadow that had learned to wear perfume, laughing at the right moments, touching his forearm just enough to look supportive without looking possessive. Every time her eyes drifted toward me, they slid away again, like I was a stain on the edge of a picture she wanted framed and hung in a better light. A server passed by with a tray of champagne flutes, and I accepted sparkling water instead, holding the glass with both hands so nobody would notice the faint tremor in my fingers. I told myself I was imagining the sting in that one sentence, that I was being overly sensitive, that I was tired. But I had heard what people laughed at and I had heard what they did not ask. Nobody asked who helped Michael pay his first rent when his job offer fell through. Nobody asked who watched his children on weekends so he could take night classes back when he was building ideas out of exhaustion and coffee. Nobody asked who co-signed the small loan he swore he would never need. Those details were not glamorous. They did not sparkle under event lighting. They did not make good stories for strangers. I stood and walked toward the wall of photographs the company had set up, a timeline of milestones printed on glossy boards. The picture started with Michael shaking hands with his co-founder, then expanded to office shots, product prototypes, ribbon cuttings. It was impressive. It was also carefully edited. Not a single photo showed the cramped apartment where he used to pace the floor, worried about payroll. Not a single line mentioned the months he stayed at my house after his divorce, sleeping in the guest room with his pride tucked under the pillow like an extra blanket. I felt a quiet ache, not because I needed credit, but because I recognized the shape of what was happening. I was being rewritten. I heard Samantha's voice behind me, light and friendly, talking to a couple near the dessert table. She was saying my name with that sweet softness that made people trust her. The same way she said bless your heart when she meant something else. Oh, that is Michael's mother, she said, and then with a laugh that sounded harmless, she has always been very intense about him. Protective. Sometimes a little difficult. But we love her anyway. The couple nodded like she had explained a weather pattern. My face stayed calm because my body already knew the old rules. Do not react, do not give her the satisfaction. But inside a different rule clicked into place, cold and clear. If Samantha could paint me as the problem in one room full of strangers, she could do it anywhere. And she could do it to Michael too. And if my own son could stand there and let her do it, then whatever I thought I was to him had already been reduced to something convenient, something manageable, something she could label and set aside. The next morning, I woke up to the soft hum of the coffee machine. The apartment was quiet, just like every other morning. But today there was something different in the air. Maybe it was the way the sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. Or maybe it was the silence that felt more suffocating than usual. I had spent so many years quietly supporting Michael, watching him grow, always proud but always in the background. I never asked for recognition. I never expected it. All I ever wanted was for him to be happy, for him to succeed. But yesterday as I stood there, listening to Samantha weave her version of the story, I realized that I had been reduced to a footnote in a chapter that no longer included me. I had always believed that family was supposed to be the safe place. The one place where you could be yourself no matter what. But with every glance Samantha shot my way, with every word she carefully chose to humiliate me, I saw it. I wasn't part of the family anymore. I had been replaced. The coldness in her voice, the way she portrayed me as someone who couldn't let go. It all made sense now. Samantha was rewriting the narrative, and the story she told everyone in that room was one where I was the villain. And what struck me the most was that Michael didn't say a word. He didn't defend me. He didn't even flinch. His silence was deafening. I kept thinking of all the sacrifices I had made. The years I spent helping him, believing that one day he would see me for what I was. A mother who loved him unconditionally. But now, it felt as though everything I had done was nothing more than an afterthought to him. I hadn't been asked to be a part of his success. I had been told in no uncertain terms that my presence was no longer required. After the launch, I went back to my apartment, feeling more isolated than ever. The house, once filled with laughter and the hustle of family, now felt cold and unwelcoming. The place that had been my home for so long, where I had raised my children, now felt like a museum of memories locked in time. As I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, the realization hit me. I had to make a decision. I couldn't continue like this, waiting for a son who no longer saw me, who had allowed someone else to dictate how I should fit into his life. I stood up, my heart heavy, and walked to the drawer where I kept all my important papers. I had to take control of my future, no matter how hard it was to admit that the family I had given everything to was no longer mine. The days that followed the launch were like a quiet storm brewing inside me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that the world I had known, my family, my place in it, was slipping through my fingers. I spent the following week doing what I always did. Keeping to myself, staying busy with small tasks, trying to ignore the unease settling in my chest. But as the days passed, the weight of it all grew heavier. Samantha's words, her cold smile, her calculated indifference, it all haunted me. I tried to tell myself that it wasn't a big deal, that I was just overreacting. But deep down I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. The turning point came one afternoon when Michael called me. His voice was calm, maybe too calm, and for the first time, I could hear the distance between us, the space that had grown ever since Samantha entered our lives. "Mom, I think we need to talk," he said. There was a pause, and I could almost hear the hesitation in his words. "I've been thinking about what happened at the launch," he added, and I braced myself. I knew this conversation wasn't going to go the way I had hoped. I had spent years taking care of him, putting his needs before my own, believing that someday he would understand what it meant to sacrifice for family. But now all I felt was a cold emptiness in his voice. "Samantha didn't mean to hurt you," he continued, almost too quickly. "It's just, she gets anxious sometimes, and I thought it was better if we kept the focus on the business. You understand, don't you?" My heart sank. How could he say that? How could he excuse her behavior? Her blatant disregard for everything I had done for him. I wanted to scream, to demand that he see the truth, but instead I just sat there, the phone pressed to my ear, my hand trembling. I wanted to tell him how much it hurt, how much I had given up, how much I had sacrificed for his happiness. But I couldn't, because I knew that he had already chosen his side. He had already let her push me aside, and no amount of words from me would change that. "I think it's best if you come over this weekend," he said, his voice shifting, the finality in his tone unmistakable. "We need to figure out where things are going with the house and everything." I knew exactly what he meant. He was asking me to leave, to step aside, to make room for Samantha. I didn't answer him right away. I didn't know what to say. The silence between us was deafening. Finally I whispered, "I'll be there." As I hung up the phone, I realized something I had been avoiding for weeks. I was no longer welcome in my own son's life, and the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just about the company or the house. It was about everything that had led me here. The years of quiet sacrifice, the moments of love and care that had been taken for granted. The betrayal wasn't just in the words Samantha had spoken. It was in the silence that followed, the absence of defense from the one person I had always counted on. I had never imagined that my own son would turn his back on me so easily. But now I saw it for what it was. A slow erosion of everything I had built. A quiet shifting of alliances that left me standing alone. The weekend arrived and I found myself sitting at my kitchen table, the same place where I had shared countless meals with Michael when he was younger. The sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the room. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the warmth was gone. Everything felt cold. The house, once a place full of memories and laughter, now felt like a house of cards, fragile and ready to collapse. I had spent the morning preparing myself. I needed to go over there, keep my composure, and make my point without making a scene. It wasn't going to be easy. I had spent years walking on eggshells, keeping the peace, allowing Michael to feel like he was the center of everything. But now I realized something. I wasn't willing to give in anymore. I was done being pushed to the sidelines. I was done being the invisible mother. As I walked to the door, the familiar creak of the wooden floor beneath my feet felt like the echo of everything I had lost. The drive to Michael's house was quiet, the streets unfamiliar in a way they hadn't been before. I thought about all the years I had spent helping him, teaching him, giving him everything I had. I thought about the countless times I had stayed up late, waiting for him to come home, always worried, always hoping he was safe. But now it was like none of it mattered. As I parked in front of his house, I took a deep breath. This was it. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. Michael was waiting for me inside, standing by the door as if nothing had changed. His smile, once so familiar, now felt like a mask. "Mom," he said, stepping aside to let me in. His tone was calm, almost too calm, and I knew immediately that this conversation wasn't going to go the way I had hoped. We sat down at the kitchen table, the same one where we used to sit together as a family. The silence stretched on between us, heavy and thick. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice almost apologetic. "I've been thinking," he began, and I could tell he was choosing his words carefully. "Samantha and I have decided it's time for you to move into a retirement community. The house is too big for you now, and we don't want you to be alone." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had always known something was coming, but hearing it out loud made it real. He wasn't just asking me to leave. He was telling me that my place in his life, in this family, no longer mattered. I stared at him, my heart sinking. "You think I need to go?" I asked quietly, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. He nodded, his eyes avoiding mine. "It's just practical, Mom. It's time for a change." A wave of anger and disbelief surged through me, but I held it back. Instead, I stood up, walking toward the window. I needed to think. I needed to make a decision, but it wasn't going to be the one he was expecting. I had spent my whole life putting others first, giving everything for them, and this was how they repaid me. This was the thanks I got for raising him, for loving him. No, I wasn't going to let it end like this. I wasn't going to let them push me out without a fight. I turned around, meeting his gaze for the first time since I'd entered. "I'm not going anywhere," I said firmly, my voice steady. "I'm not leaving my home. And you need to understand that." Michael looked taken aback, like he hadn't expected this reaction. He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up my hand. "I've given enough. Now it's time for you to understand that I deserve more than this." He stood there, silent for a moment before finally nodding slowly. But I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. He didn't know what to do with me anymore. And for the first time, that gave me strength. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't going to disappear quietly. I had fought for everything in my life, and this time I was going to fight for myself. The days after that conversation felt like a quiet war. Michael's silence weighed heavily on me, but it also made something else clear. I wasn't going to change his mind, not by pleading, not by asking. It wasn't about what I had done for him, or how much I loved him anymore. It was about what Samantha wanted, and what she had convinced him I no longer deserved. But what they didn't understand was that I wasn't going to let it go. I spent the next few days doing exactly what I had always done, keeping myself busy, staying out of their way. But this time, every time I entered my home, the walls seemed to close in tighter, suffocating me with memories of a time when things felt simpler. I had always been there for Michael. Even when he made mistakes, even when he struggled, I was there. I stood by him through his first failed business venture, through his divorce, through the late-night phone calls when he couldn't sleep because he was worried about his next paycheck. I held him up silently, always in the background. But now he didn't even seem to see me. I couldn't let it go, not anymore. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just wait for things to change on their own. If they wanted me out of the picture, I would make sure I wasn't erased so easily. The first step was to get organized. I started by going through old papers, things I had tucked away, things I hadn't thought about in years. There were documents, old bank statements, receipts for things Michael didn't even know about. Over the years, I had made sure that I was always prepared, always taking care of things that no one else had time for. But now those papers weren't just records of past transactions. They were my insurance. I went to the bank quietly, without telling anyone. The teller who helped me had seen me there countless times over the years. She smiled politely, but there was a new tension in the air as I asked her to pull up some old accounts. The silence that stretched between us felt heavy, but I didn't back down. I needed to know where things stood. As she scrolled through the records, something caught my eye. Accounts I hadn't been aware of. Transfers that didn't make sense. Money that had been set aside for what? For whom? I didn't say anything right away, but in my mind the pieces started to fall into place. The house, the company, everything Michael had worked for. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about something bigger. Something that no one had bothered to tell me. I walked out of the bank with a plan. I wasn't just going to wait for them to push me out. I was going to stand my ground. I was going to make sure that whatever came next, I was prepared for it. They thought they had control. They thought they had all the power. But they didn't know what I knew. And I wasn't going to let them take everything from me. The days dragged on after my visit to the bank. I had all the information I needed now, but I couldn't bring myself to confront Michael just yet. There was something cold in the way he had treated me, and something even colder in the way he had allowed Samantha to take control of everything without question. I kept replaying our last conversation in my head. How he had brushed me off. How he had simply accepted Samantha's narrative without even considering my side. It hurt in a way that I wasn't ready to admit to myself. But I wasn't going to be pushed aside anymore. I had spent too many years looking the other way, keeping my opinions to myself, staying quiet when things were wrong. But no more. This was my time to finally stand up for myself, to make them see me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. I spent the next few days quietly organizing everything. Sorting through old papers, going over bank statements, making sure everything was in order. I had to be ready for whatever came next. I couldn't let them take my home, take my place in this family without a fight. When I finally walked back into Michael's house a few days later, the tension was palpable. Samantha was there, of course, standing in the kitchen talking to Michael like they were in their own little world. The warmth that used to be between us was gone, replaced by something colder, something calculated. Michael looked up when I entered, but his smile was stiff, strained, like he wasn't sure how to handle me anymore. "Mom," he said, his voice hesitant. "We need to talk." I nodded, my heart heavy, but my resolve stronger than ever. "We do," I replied. "And it's time we had a real conversation." We sat at the kitchen table again, the same one where we had sat countless times before. This time, though, the room felt different. It felt like a battlefield, and the stakes were higher than they had ever been. Samantha stood off to the side, her eyes narrowed, her arms crossed over her chest like she was waiting for me to make a move. Michael didn't say anything at first, and for a moment, there was nothing but the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my breathing. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and then I spoke. "I know what's been happening," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I know what you and Samantha have been planning, Michael." He looked at me, his face unreadable, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a wall of indifference. "What are you talking about, Mom?" he asked, his tone more defensive than I had ever heard it. "Don't play dumb with me," I replied. "I know about the accounts, the property transfers, everything." Samantha's eyes flickered, but she didn't say a word. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair, and for the first time, I saw a hint of unease in him. "You think I don't know how you've been trying to push me out of the family?" I continued. "How you've been working behind my back to make sure I don't have a place here anymore. You think I don't see it?" There was a long silence, and then Michael sighed, rubbing his face with his hand. "I didn't want it to come to this," he said quietly. "But you don't understand, Mom. Samantha and I interrupted, my voice sharp now. "Don't make excuses. You knew exactly what you were doing. And now you want me to just leave without a fight. Well, that's not happening. I'm not going anywhere." Samantha opened her mouth as if to speak, but I held up my hand, silencing her. "I've spent years supporting you, Michael. I've put my own life on hold for you. And now you want to throw me away like I'm nothing." The words stung as I said them, but they needed to be said. "You can't erase me. You can't erase everything I've done for this family. And I won't let you. Not now, not ever." The room was still for a moment, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Michael looked at me, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. "I never wanted this to happen," he said quietly. "But Samantha, I don't care about her," I snapped. "This is about you. You've chosen her over me, and you've chosen her over the family we built. But I won't let you tear everything apart without a fight." Michael sat back in his chair, his face pale, and for the first time, I saw him as he really was, lost, unsure and afraid. And in that moment I realized something. He wasn't the same person anymore. He wasn't the son I had raised. But that didn't matter now. What mattered was that I was going to fight for my place in this world. And I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. The tension between Michael and me hung in the air like a storm cloud, ready to burst. Samantha stood by silently, watching us with an unreadable expression, but I could feel her presence, like a silent force backing Michael's every word. It was clear she had already won him over, and there was no use pretending otherwise. But that didn't mean I was going to give up without a fight. I leaned back in my chair, my hands folded in front of me, and I stared at Michael. He looked uncomfortable, his face torn between guilt and defensiveness. He hadn't expected this. He thought he could handle me the way he handled everyone else, by brushing me aside. But that was a mistake. I wasn't like the others. I was his mother. And no matter how much he tried to hide it, he knew what I had done for him. He knew what he owed me. Michael, I said slowly, carefully choosing my words. This isn't about Samantha. This is about you and me. This is about how I've been there for you. Every single time, no questions asked. But now you've made it clear that I'm no longer part of your life. He opened his mouth to protest, but I held up my hand, stopping him. Don't try to explain it away. I see what's happening here. And I'm not going to stand by and let you erase me. The words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, I saw the guilt flicker in his eyes. But it quickly faded, replaced by the same coldness I had seen in Samantha's eyes earlier. I'm not erasing you, Mom, he said quietly, though his voice lacked conviction. But you have to understand. Things have changed. Samantha and we've built a life together, and I just need you to understand that. His words felt hollow, like he was saying what he thought I wanted to hear, not what he truly felt. I could hear the underlying message loud and clear. He was done with me. Done with the woman who had given everything for him. Done with the mother who had sacrificed so much. The realization hit me like a slap in the face. But I wasn't about to let him see how much it hurt. I had spent too many years swallowing my pride, holding back my feelings and pretending everything was fine. But not anymore. I wasn't going to be the quiet, obedient mother anymore. I wasn't going to let him think that I would just fade into the background. I stood up slowly, my back straight, my voice steady. You may not want to erase me, Michael, I said, my voice cold and firm. But you've already made your choice. And I'll be damned if I let you push me out without a fight. Michael stared at me, speechless, as I turned and walked out of the room. I could hear Samantha's voice behind me, but I didn't turn around. I wasn't going to waste another second on people who didn't care about me. It was time for me to take control of my own life. And I wasn't going to let anyone, not even my own son, take that away from me. The next few days were filled with a strange kind of silence. Michael didn't reach out to me, and I didn't reach out to him. I kept to myself, organizing my thoughts, reflecting on everything that had happened. I had never imagined that it would come to this. I had always believed that family was something that, no matter how much it changed, would always hold strong. But the reality of it hit me hard. I had spent so many years giving, sacrificing, and loving without ever asking for anything in return. But now, everything I had built with Michael seemed so fragile, so easily discarded. The phone call came on a quiet afternoon, and when I saw Michael's name flash on the screen, my heart skipped a beat. I hesitated before answering. Mom, he said, his voice softer than I expected. Can we talk? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I had waited for this moment, but I wasn't sure what to expect. Of course, I replied, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. I've been thinking, he began, and I could hear the hesitation in his words. I know I've hurt you. I know I've done things that shouldn't have happened. And I'm sorry. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I had never heard him speak like this before. The words he said were the ones I had been waiting for, but the weight of them made it hard to breathe. It's just, he continued. I've realized something. I've been so focused on building my life with Samantha that I forgot what really mattered. I forgot about you. And I've taken you for granted. I closed my eyes, letting his words sink in. This wasn't easy for him to say, and I could tell that he was finally seeing the truth. The truth that had been so clear to me for so long, but that he had been blind to. Michael, I said softly, I don't expect you to be perfect. I never have. But I've always expected respect. And I've always expected to be a part of your life. There was a long silence, and for a moment, I wondered if he was going to say anything more. Finally, he spoke again. I want to make things right, he said, his voice filled with sincerity. I don't want to lose you, Mom. I don't want to lose what we had. The words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. For the first time in a long while, I felt like my son saw me again, like he understood what I had been trying to tell him all this time. It's going to take time, I said, my voice steady. But I'm willing to work through this. We can't change what's happened, but we can move forward. And in that moment I knew we would. It wasn't going to be easy and it wasn't going to be quick. But it was a start. A start toward rebuilding what had been broken. Michael and I still had a long way to go, but for the first time in a long while I had hope. Hope that things could be different. That we could be different. The road ahead would be difficult, but it was one I was willing to walk. And this time I wouldn't be walking it alone.